Okay, last time we finished chapter 28. We're going to try to get into 29 and hopefully 30 this time. We don't know how far we're going to get. But before we finish chapter 28, last time we went rather quickly over something that's very important, and I don't want to miss the significance of it. So we'll emphasize it one more time. Look at the very end of chapter 28. You're all familiar with that with that passage, and this is the passage that deals with Jacob's ladder or Jacob's staircase. And we all know that after the deception of Isaac, that Esau wants to kill Jacob, right? And so Rebekah says, Jacob, you need to get out of here so your brother doesn't kill you. What you need to do is you need to go back to my homeland because I don't want you to choose a wife from among the Canaanite women. And so Jacob is on the run. He's probably leaving from Beersheba, which is in the southern part of Israel, and he's heading up to Haran. And just for reference purposes on the map, this is not a very big map, but all right, here's the Red Sea, of course. Here's the Dead Sea. Here's the Sea of Galilee. Jerusalem is right here. Gaza is over here. This is where Abimelech was in that area, as you remember. Beersheba is like due east of Gaza. It's down south of Jerusalem. So where Jacob was heading, he was heading all the way back to the land where Abraham came. Remember, Abraham was called from Ur out of the Chaldeans. God says, come to a land that I'll show you. And he makes it as far as Haran, and he hangs around there, and God's got to remind him again. So that's when he travels from Haran down to the promised land, to the land of Canaan. But Haran is where Abraham's people were. That's where Abraham's servant was sent back to find Rebekah as a wife for Isaac. And so Jacob is heading back to the very spot. But he doesn't get very far. He gets to a place called Bethel, which is just north of Jerusalem, just a few miles north of Jerusalem. And he beds down there that night, and he has this amazing dream. And what does he see in the dream? It says in verse 12, he had a dream, behold, a ladder. The word there, ladder, could be interpreted as staircase. But anyway, it was a ladder that it was set up on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. And he makes the promise to him. And then after this happens, Jacob wakes up, verse 16. He says he woke from his sleep and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. The house of God is Bethel. Just like Bethlehem means what? Bethlehem, house of bread. So Bethel is like El Shaddai, house of God. So he names that place Bethel. And he says, this is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And the interesting thing about this passage is that Jesus himself refers to this. We read it last time in John 1:51. Remember when Jesus was calling the disciples, I think it was, in fact, let's turn over there really quickly and see how, because that's so important. So let's find John, at the very end of chapter 1.
Somebody must have read that to Mohammed, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. John chapter 1, look at the very end of John 1. This is when Jesus calling the disciples. In fact, Juan, if you would read for us, starting in verse 45 through 51.
Philip found Nathanael and told him, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nazareth, can anything come from there? Nathanael asked.
Anything good come from there, huh?
Anything good come from there. Come and see, said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, here is a true Israelite in whom there is nothing false. How do you know me? Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel. Jesus answered, You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You shall see greater things than that. He then added, I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man.
So it is thought by many, and I believe this too, that one of the things that convinced Nathanael that Jesus was the promised one is, in fact, at the time, or the event that Jesus refers to here, he saw Nathanael under the fig tree, and it's thought that not only was Nathanael sitting under the fig tree, that he was reading his scriptures, and he was reading the very thing we just read out of Genesis about Jacob's ladder. And Jesus, in fact, he doesn't refer to it specifically, but what he says there in John 1:51, truly, truly, I say to you, you shall see the heavens open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. That is nothing other than what Jacob saw in his dream. And so this is a very significant event. And so when Jacob declares that he has seen the gate of heaven, what is he referring to? What has God revealed to him there? Remember, Jesus himself said, I am the gate. What he saw, heaven opened up. The gate that he saw there, that was Jesus. And Jacob's ladder, I believe, is symbolic of the cross. Now, the thing that I don't want us to miss about that is that he says, in verse 2 it says, and he had a dream, and behold, he saw a ladder that was set up on earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on that. The symbolism there, I believe, is that the angels were ascending and descending on the cross or by means of the cross. What does that mean for us? What do the ascending angels mean? Well, the symbolism there could be those are our prayers going up. The angels carrying our prayers up. And they do so what? By means of the cross. What are the descending angels? The descending angels is heaven sending blessings down to us, again, by means of the cross. And the whole idea is that if we do not accept the cross, not just a piece of wood, what it symbolized, the sacrifice on the cross, the finished work of Christ on the cross. If we do not accept that, then not only are our prayers cut off, but the means of the blessings are cut off as well. So this really, to me, what this emphasizes is the significance, the importance, the criticality of the cross in our relationship with God. Any other comments about that? Okay, so after this event, then Jacob makes his way over. Hey, Johnny, come on in. Jacob makes his way to the land of his ancestors. Brother Kenny, would you pick up there and start reading in chapter 29 of Genesis?
Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the field with 3 flocks of sheep lying there because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll a stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob asked the shepherds, My brothers, where are you from? We're from Haran, they replied. He said to them, Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson? Yes, we know him, they answered. Then Jacob asked them, Is he well? Yes, he is, they said. And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep. Look, he said, the sun is still high. It is not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture. We can't, they replied, until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep. While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud.
Pause right there. Okay. What we see here is somewhat similar to the circumstance where Abraham sends his servant over to the land of his people to find a wife for his son Isaac. Okay, so Jacob winds up at roughly the same place that that Abraham's servant went to find Rebekah. But what are the differences when Abraham's servant went over to find the wife for Isaac? What happened? What led to the discovery of Rebekah and the revelation that she was the right one?
She met him at the well?
Yeah, well, just like this,
She offered to
What is-
water his camels.
right? She offered the water as camels, but what preceded that?
The servant had prayed, seeking God
Yeah.
Exactly
to
right.
find the right person.
That's exactly right. When the servant went over there, he prayed. He said, God, please give me a sign so that I'll know the right one. He said that what the sign will be is that when the woman offers water, if she also offers to water all of my camels, then I'll know that she's the right one. What do we see absent in this account of Jacob seeking his wife?
No prayer.
No prayer. And so, but all of a sudden he sees Rachel, and it's love at first sight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he, I don't know if he rushes up to her, but he rushes up and he kisses her. Now, does it turn out, is Rachel the right one for him? Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel, okay.
Is she the right one?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Yeah, what's the no part of that?
The no part of that is that Leah,
Was the
the
first
sister, was the firstborn, and she rightfully was the right one.
Yeah, but what is even more right about it, if we ask what was God's plan here? Was God's plan going to be fulfilled through Rachel or through Leah? No,
Leah.
it's through Leah.
Why?
In a big way. Leah is the mother of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
Leah is also the mother of Levi, the priestly line. We're going to see later on, we're going to make the list of the kids so we don't get them mixed up, because it is easy to get them mixed up. But whom did Rachel bear?
Joseph and Benjamin.
That's right. She bears two. They are not of either the priestly line or the messianic line. Now, Joseph was certainly a fine man, a man of integrity.
But he was used to save the people.
He absolutely
Yes, he
was.
was.
He absolutely, he was greatly used. But he was used to save people temporally, not eternally.
Okay. Okay.
So, what we see here is very interesting, and it goes along, it develops. Jacob, again, as Wanda pointed out, he doesn't precede his venture by prayer and asking God for a sign, he doesn't ask God to lead him to the right one. He is led to the right one, interestingly, through deception.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that what?
That he got the birthright through deception.
That's right. But as we stated a couple of weeks ago, Isaac, his elderly father, is deceived, right, by Jacob. Jacob participates in it, but Isaac is deceived into doing the right thing, into making the right choice. He isn't deceived into doing something wrong. The same way here we see that Jacob is going to be deceived. He's deceived into doing the right thing that fulfills God's plan, even though it's not what he really wants. So, let's read on. Verse 12. Kathy, you want to read for us?
He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. And soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, "You are my own flesh and blood." After Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you're a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful.
Pause right there. That statement there, we see in verse 17, and Leah's eyes were weak. Does anybody have a different translation there?
Tender-eyed.
Say again?
Tender.
tender, that's really a better translation. My translation says weak, but probably a better translation there was not to say that, that she wore like Coke bottle glasses that she couldn't see, but rather weak there is used in the sense that she had tender eyes or she had submissive eyes. And the idea was not that she couldn't see or there was anything unseemly or uncomely about her, but she had tender eyes, she had submissive eyes. And I think, we often read in the scriptures that the eyes are indicative of what is in someone's heart, right? Sometimes it's said the eye is the window of the soul. I think this is intended to mean something positive about Leah rather than something negative about her.
Could it be like bashful or, not
Could be.
outgoing? She was quiet and maybe wouldn't look at you directly where
Yeah.
the other would.
Yeah, in the sense of being, more submissive.
It's more of her character than her physical, right?
Yeah. Now, what we see about Rachel is that everything about her seems to be that it says that she was beautiful of form and face, and that is what attracted Jacob to her. But again, that particular attraction there was not a positive thing, right? Because Rachel, even though she was beautiful of form and face, she was not God's real choice for Jacob. It was Leah. And we're going to see that later on. But, so this is an example of Jacob's desire is for the beautiful one, and his principal desire is not for what God has planned for him. So I think there's a tremendous lesson that we see that's built into this. Okay, verse 18. Who's next? John, you want to read? You want to pass? Kenny?
I'll pass.
All right.
18.
18, yes, ma'am.
And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And was it Laban? Laban said, it is better that I give her to thee than I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And
Pause right there. That's not really a ringing endorsement of his future son-in-law. Better I give her to you than some other guy. So. I don't know. So, Laban's he's got his own agenda here. So read on.
Maybe he was hoping he would take her and go somewhere instead of coming back home.
Maybe so. I don't know. It could be that old Rachel was was a high maintenance type of a child. You know what I'm talking about.
And
Was
Jacob,
that
Headstrong.
headstrong? Was what
The other
Rachel-
day, they said if she wears her hair in a ponytail or something else, it was just 3 things. That's low maintenance girl. One that does her hair all up all the time and everything, that's high maintenance.
Okay, read on.
and Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, but for the love that he had for her.
I can just see him writing that on a Valentine's Day card. I worked for 7 years, but it just seemed like a day. Because I just love you so much.
That may be where they got this 7 years of bad luck. It didn't do really good.
So, yeah. So anyway, so there's the story. It's Jacob, he rushes headlong into this. The first beautiful girl, he says, I'm in love. He rushes up to kiss her. He goes to see her dad. Can I marry her? Dad says, okay, I guess he'll do. If you work for me for 7 years, then you can have the girl. So he works for 7 years, and after 7 years, he's still madly in love. He's still smitten. Verse 21, read on. Troy, you want to read?
Sure. And Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for the handmaid. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore thou beguiled me?
All right, pause right there. So what does this tell you about the nature of the feast? Maybe a little bit too much wine was served that night? That's what I'm thinking. So they have their feast and their celebration. They go to the marriage tent. Laban says, all right, this is my chance, and he sneaks his firstborn daughter in, Leah. So he is actively deceiving Jacob, because the deal that was struck between Jacob and Laban is that Jacob would work for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, that he would get Rachel, his first choice. But the appointed day comes, and Leah is sent to the marriage bed. Jacob doesn't realize until the next morning after the marriage is consummated. He says, and what does he say? He says, what is this you have done to me? Now, have we seen those words before? We have. When Abraham and Sarah were newlyweds, so to speak, they went down to Egypt, remember? And Sarah was beautiful. Pharaoh lusted after her, took her into his tent, and bad things started to happen. And then he goes to Abraham and says, you know, he says, what have you done to me? He uses those same words. The same way with Abimelech, right? Abimelech takes Sarah. Bad things start happening to him. Abimelech says, what is this that you have done to me? Isaac, the same thing. He goes to the next generation of Abimelech. With his wife, Rebekah, Abimelech the second takes Rebekah in. Bad things start happening to him. What is this that you have done to me? And no doubt it's not written, but I suspect that when Isaac realizes that he has been deceived, he probably spoke those same words to somebody, to Jacob. What is this that you have done to me?
Maybe that's what Adam said.
Yeah. Maybe it goes way back even further, huh? What is this?
Okay, guys, watch out.
Yeah. That you have done to me. But, you know, at this point in time, you know, you got to be thinking, old Jacob's got to be thinking, I guess I really deserve this, don't I? Not only because of what I did, I am a deceiver, and I have been deceived. And this deception, you know, we're going to see here that what Jacob has done here, he winds up with two wives. He winds up with the wife that God wanted him to have, the mother of the Messianic line. He winds up with Rachel, the love of his life, so to speak. But this whole episode cost him 14 years of labor.
What was the age at that time?
Now that's a very good question. How old was Jacob at this time? Was he a 17-year-old kid who shouldn't know better? Jacob was probably in his 70s or 80s at this time. Yeah, he was no spring chicken. He was one of those kind of guys who probably left his blinkers on an awful lot when he was going straight down the road. You know what I'm talking about.
No, it's just automatic when coming off of joy, coming on. Something about the curve, it doesn't cut itself off. My wife used to say your blinker, and I couldn't hear it, you know.
Well,
It'd say on all the way to that other road there, you know. One day I was going on there and this cop, he started to pull out, you know, he thought I was turning, you know, and I went straight and give you this dirty look, my blinker. No, but it's something about the road there, it doesn't cut it off.
it's the road or the cars. I notice the older I get, the cars that I get, the blinker has a tendency to stick more, you know.
Well,
it doesn't shut off when it should.
Well, the new
Nothing
cars,
to do with me. It's
I found that the
car.
new cars don't have one.
Okay, where do we leave
Should
off?
have after 20 seconds, it goes off.
It never comes on, they just turn.
Oh,
So at this point in time, Jacob, when he discovers the deception, he says, what is this that you've done to me? Why have you deceived me? Verse 26, Jackie, would you pick up there?
Laban replied, It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one.
Pause right there. At that point, Jacob said, well, why didn't
Why
somebody
didn't you
tell
tell me
me?
first?
You know, why didn't you tell me? You know, if I'd have known that was the deal, I'd have worked really hard to get Leah married off, you know, rather than having this take place, because this is really not what I want. Okay, read on.
Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we'll give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years' work. And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant girl Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maidservant. Jacob lay with Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years.
Okay, so you see how the cycle went. He meets, when he first gets to Haran at the well, he meets Rachel, falls in love with her, goes to the dad says, work for me for 7 years and you can have her. So he works for 7 years. The marriage ceremony takes place. Leah is substituted. He says, I'm deceived, I really want Rachel. Laban says, all right, okay, you can have Rachel also if you work for me another 7 years. So I guess a week after the marriage to Leah, there's a second marriage to Rachel, but then there's 7 years of labor that takes place after that. In other words, he doesn't have to wait for full additional 7 years to marry
What was the
Rachel.
work he was doing?
I guess he was working in the working with animals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was. We see later on that he was quite astute at raising farm animals, sheep and goats and whatever. All right, verse 31.
Okay.
Wanda, would you read that for us?
When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren.
Pause right there. You know, it's interesting we have this turn here because we saw that Sarah was originally barren for a long period of time, and then Rebecca was barren for about 20 years. But in this case, it's the one that God has ordained. She is the one who has the fruitful womb, but the other one turns out to be barren at least for a time. Read on 32.
Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, it is because the Lord has seen my misery.
All right, pause right there. I want you to read through that slowly, and we're going to make the list of the 12, well, we got 11 children of Jacob here, but we can fill in the blank for the others. So the first wife is Leah. Okay, and then she has a maidservant. Who is Leah's maidservant? What is her name?
Zilpah.
Zilpah. And then we have Rachel, and she has a maid by the name of what?
Bilhah.
B-I-L-H-A-H. Okay, all right. So Leah's first son is
Reuben.
Reuben. Which means what?
My misery.
See a son.
Yeah, see a son, I think is a
Oh,
better
see a son.
translation. It says, see a son.
He has seen, yeah.
Okay. All right, so who's the second son?
Simeon.
Okay. Read on until we get to Simeon.
Okay. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too. So she named him Simeon.
Okay. Simeon, I think, literally means hearing or to hear.
One who hears.
Okay.
Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. So he was named Levi.
Okay, so that literally means
Attached.
or joined together. Okay.
She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, this time I will praise the Lord. So she named him Judah.
Judah.
And then she stopped having children.
And Judah means praise.
Praise.
Okay. Who comes along next? Read on for us.
When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and through her too, I too can build a family." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." Because of this, she named him Dan.
Dan, which means,
Meet your son's name.
Vindicated.
Vindicated?
Had a dog.
okay,
Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "I have had a great struggle with my sister and I have won." So she named him Naphtali.
which means what?
What a struggle.
Struggle and victory. Struggle and one. Okay, now who's next?
When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" So she named him Gad.
Meaning what?
Good fortune.
Okay.
Or a true, what is
True.
that? Troo. What is that?
All right, who's next?
Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am! The women will call me happy." So she named him Asher.
Meaning?
Happy.
Okay.
During wheat season, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah.
Hold on there a second. Mandrake, what is a mandrake? Anybody ever eaten a mandrake?
Like a maid?
Like what?
Is it like an opposite of what a maid does?
No, a mandrake is a kind of something you can eat, something you can
Oh, really?
consume. A mandrake. I looked that up, and it is said that this was an Eastern, it could either be a fruit or it could be like a spice. But it was said that it had some hallucinogenic properties to it, and it was sometimes used in pagan rituals because it would kind of, it's like LSD, I guess, or maybe like marijuana.
Loco weed.
Is that
Loco
sort of
weed.
like loco weed? Yeah, I guess that's right. I've never heard of it before, but anyway. So anyway, here's the story of the mandrakes.
But they had a bunch of other kids too, didn't they?
Well, we're gonna read on. We got a few more to go.
What I'm saying is, it says Leah said, "Happy am I for the daughters." So they must have had a bunch of girls mixed all in this whole group.
Yeah, there's only one daughter that's mentioned. We're gonna read about her next. But yeah, you're right. There's probably more than just one. I think she's mentioned because there's a story we're gonna read about her later on, Dina. Okay. Let's finish the rest of the children's here.
Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too?" Okay. You want to just skip down to the part with
No,
the
keep
sons?
reading.
Okay.
We'll get to it.
Very well, Rachel said, "He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." So when
You gotta think, what kind of a story is that?
That's by
that's sisters. Men married sisters.
We're gonna
Oh,
chalk
you were
this up.
talking about
The scripture
Okay.
exposes,
Yeah.
the scriptures expose the weakness of the flesh, do they
Yeah.
not? Even among the patriarchs and matriarchs. All right.
So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me," she said. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband." So she named him Issachar.
Meaning,
Honor? No, wait a
I'd say
minute, I
happy
skipped one.
coverage.
Reward?
a reward, I think.
Mhm.
SSDs.
Well, she paid for him.
Yeah.
Should have named him Mandrake, huh?
Crazy.
Yeah.
All right, read on.
Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun,
Meaning,
honor.
okay. Some translations call that dwelling. Anybody have that there? Okay. All right, read on. We got
Sometime later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah.
10:20.
Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. She named him Joseph and said, may the Lord add to me another son.
And another son was added. We don't have his name in the story, but who is that?
Benjamin.
And what does Joseph mean?
Have become rich.
Add, may he add?
Oh, who's
Yeah.
rich? Okay, that's K, that's Joseph.
Rich, I think that's,
Yep.
I have become rich. Okay. So, how many sons do we have here? 1, 2,
No, Joseph is Ad.
6.
That's 12.
Yep, that's all 12, including Benjamin. Benjamin means what?
Let me find Benjamin.
Ben means son.
Jamin, son
Benjamin.
of,
It literally means son of my right hand, or the strength of my right hand. So he's the guy, he's the one at my side.
Son of my right hand, yeah. And that's funny, because the Benjamites were known as the left-handed tribe.
Isn't that weird?
And this is,
That's a very interesting point. Benjamin is the son of my right hand, and that's right, they were the left-handed ones. Huh,
no,
there's a message there, though.
mm-hmm. Joseph is Ad.
As Ad, yeah.
And Benjamin is, I mean, that L word, that rich thing is something about divination. That the Lord
this all happened after they
Well,
were married.
the context of ad and being rich is kind of the same thing.
okay.
All these guys happened after they were barren the first time, or?
Well, after barren,
No, the ladies could, if, over here we read and it said they were barren and,
yeah, Rachel was barren for a time until God opened her womb.
I was thinking maybe that was that plant.
Could be.
Fertile plant.
And the last 2 of the 12,
When
right?
you look at the
Eleven,
birth
12.
order, Joseph and Benjamin were the last 2 who won.
Uh-huh. So they're number 11 and 12. Let's get the birth order again.
Okay, Reuben is 1,
1, 2, 3, 4, and then we go over here, right?
5 is Dan, 6.
5 and 6. And then,
7 and 8 was Gad and Asher.
yeah, 7, 8,
9 and 10, Zechar and Zebulun.
10, Issachar and Zebulun, and then 11 and 12.
I guess this was the time that the Lord said, no more than one wife.
I wonder if any of them were
That doesn't come
jealous.
until later on. What's that?
Yeah.
What if they were all
it said-
jealous?
Yeah,
It said
you can
Leah
tell.
was jealous of her, Rachel was jealous of her.
Right, that's why she was
And-
made barren.
Yeah.
and I'm sure Leah was jealous of her sister because she was the one that was loved.
Which one was, okay, yeah, Rachel, they were both sisters, okay.
Mhm.
Well, yeah.
I don't know if she was struck barren because of jealousy. I think she was barren because God wanted these other ones, because that was his plan, the firstborn.
Yeah,
So he's just waiting for these later ones.
It is said, and I read something interesting about this, that it is said that the children of Jacob, we know from reading ahead, that Jacob's name was Israel. These are the children of Israel. These are the beginning of the whole nation of Israel. But it's said that even in the naming of the children of Israel, we see a messianic message. And we really do, because the messianic message begins with what? See, the Son. Okay? And so when the Son comes, the Son that's referred to here, this Reuben, see a son is a foreshadowing of Christ. He is the Son. He is the promised Son. And then the next thing that is this is sometimes referred to as path of salvation through the message to Israel, the salvation through Christ, which is you see the Son, then you hear Him, and then you are joined to Him in a relationship, and then after the joining you praise, okay, and then you receive your reward. But through that, there's a vindication, right? That is, you are declared righteous. And then there's not only a struggle, but there's a victory. There's the struggle of life, but then the victory of heaven. And then the reward and the honor come.
Well, good fortune and happiness. 7 and 8.
Yep, that's right. I'm sorry, I missed those. Yeah, good fortune comes with it. True happiness,
Then
reward, honor, true riches. And then this is an interesting one here. The right hand, the right hand is always referred to as the hand of power, that which has, when God stretches out His right hand, that is the hand that does things, the power. And so Benjamin, the last one, meaning God really should be the right hand. He should be the right hand in our lives. He is the one who provides the power. It's not the power that we provide for ourselves. And I think it's interesting that the Benjamites, they were the left-handed. They were trying to work with their left hand, but God was saying, I am your right hand. Rely on your right hand and not on your left hand, because you are, the Benjamites, they turned out to be, well, they started out being left-handed people. Saul was a Benjamite, and Saul, the first king of Israel, was a Benjamite. He was a left-handed guy.
Yeah.
Saul, who became Paul, starts off being a left-handed guy, and later on becomes a right-handed guy, if you get
he was also a
the symbolism.
Benjamite.
He was a Benjamite. He was a foreigner.
But,
Interesting. Thank you for bringing that up.
but even though you said they wasn't a line, Joseph was used by God to allow the line to stay alive, because probably if they had stayed where they were, they wouldn't have had anything to eat.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing too. You think about that. You think of the two. I mean, we see here among the patriarchs and the matriarchs, they all had their weak underbelly. They all had they went astray. You think of two of the most virtuous people in the Old Testament. When I think of those who are just imbued with virtue, I think of Joseph, one of them, and I think of, who's another one you think of? Samuel.
From the Old Testament.
Yeah.
With Daniel?
Daniel is one who comes to my mind. He was imbued with virtue. But those guys, Joseph certainly wasn't of the lineage of Christ. Neither was Daniel. I don't think Samuel was either. He was Levi, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's strange the way God does things. And why Judah was the chosen one, we don't really see anything that's very virtuous about Judah at all. We see his shortcomings more than anything else, don't we? But God's ways are not our ways. That's all I can say about that. Okay, this last part of chapter 30 is interesting, and it speaks to something that I know very little about. So I'm going to have Brother Kenny read that.
After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children from whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. He added, name your wages, and I will pay them. Jacob said to him, you know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? What shall I give you, he asked. Don't give me anything, Jacob replied. But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored sheep, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages.
Pause right there. So, Jacob says, I'm getting ready to pack up and leave. I want something of my own. What can I have? Laban says, well, what do you want? And Jacob says, why don't you just go let me pick the speckled and spotted sheep out of your herds? Sheep and, does he say sheep and, or sheep and goats?
Sheep and goats.
Sheep and goats. And Laban says, okay. Why would Laban be okay with that?
They're not the prized ones.
Yeah, those that are speckled and spotted, they were never considered to be that. They were kind of the outcasts. So he says, all right, you can go take the ones that I consider the sickly ones, and you can take them all. Okay, read on.
And let me see.
33.
Yeah. And my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on any of the lambs,
The wages.
the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored, will be considered stolen. Agreed, said Laban. Let it be as you have said. That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all these speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued
All right, pause right there just a second. So what does he do? He picks out the speckled and the spotted ones, the defective ones, so to speak, and he separates them by a 3-day journey. And basically he says that if any quote-unquote good or unspeckled or unspotted animals appear in my flock, they'll be considered stolen, meaning what? I'll give them back to you. So if there's any good animals come out of these speckled and spotted ones, you're going to get them back. All right, Kathy, would you pick up at 37?
Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and made white strips on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs, so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in the heat, when they were in heat and came to drink, they made it in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked, speckled, or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest of the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks to himself, and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the strong females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals, so that they would mate near the branches. But the animals were weak. It would not take place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones to Jacob. In this way the man grew exceedingly prosperous, and came to own his own large flock, and maid servants, and men servants, and camels and donkeys.
What do you make of this strange routine that Jacob engaged in? Verse 3 says, Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white stripes in them, exposing the white which was in the rods. And he set the rods in front of the watering holes. When the animals came there to mate, they saw these things. What was that about? Does that mean anybody's ever raised animals before? Didn't mean anything to me, but as I was reading about this, what it was said, and you know, some people even use this today. It is said that when the animals see something when they are mating, that is what they will produce. And so what did Jacob wanted to make sure that his animals produced? He didn't want any unspotted animals. He wanted to make sure that all of the offspring were spotted. Why? Because he got to keep the spotted and striped ones, whereas the good ones, they went back to Laban. So in order to do that, and again, I believe this was God's intervention. It's a strange way that it works. But Laban took some sticks, some trees, and he peeled them so they were striped and spotted, and he made sort of a corral, if you will, and he put it by the watering hole so that whenever the animals came there to mate, they were seeing the spots and the stripes, and therefore they were producing the spots and the striped animals. There's probably a spiritual allegory in there somewhere, but we're not going to investigate that today. I need more time to think about that. All right, that's the end of chapter 30. All right, one of the things I wanted us to think about as we're going is what I wrote up on the board. The key to contentment is not getting what you want, but rather wanting what you get. And I would say parenthetically, wanting what you get from God. You know, we see in this lesson that what Jacob really thought he wanted was what? He wanted Rachel. But that's not what God wanted. And in reading between the lines, we can see that Jacob never really seemed to be that satisfied with Leah. His desire was always towards Rachel. And so he was discontent for a period of time. How does that apply in our lives? You know, if we get, one of the other things that I wrote down, that I read this week, that I think is very significant, is one author said, many Christians are just one prayer away from a better relationship with God. What is the right prayer? What is the one prayer we should pray that would bring us into a closer relationship with God? Well, one of them is, not my will, but thine be done. And so if we ever get to the point of praying that prayer, you know, God, I really don't want my will. I really want your perfect will. Because I know that your will is better than mine. You make a lot better choices. And if I would just rely upon your will, then I'd be in a lot better place. So we pray that. Let's assume we pray that prayer. And then something comes along that we don't like. Okay? You pray that prayer, and then, you know, some nut comes and runs into your house. Okay? Or somebody comes along and hurts you. You come down with some sort of a disease. You say, well, God, this is not what I want. Well, you just pray, what I want, God, is your will and not mine. And so God's will is done in your life, and you don't like it. What lesson did we learn from that? Well, if we pray that prayer earnestly, God will give us not what we want, but what we need. And what we need to do is adjust our thinking to say, I'm really satisfied with what God has given me here. Even though it's not my first choice, not even my second choice, maybe not my fifth choice, but it's what you gave me, and I'm going to be content with it.
That reminds me.
That's where life gets to be right and good. Yes, ma'am.
It reminds me of what we went through 4 years with Pete. That's what we wanted.
Yeah.
You know, after a few years, we knew he wasn't,
Yeah.
well, we thought he wasn't going back.
Yeah.
But he gave us Gwent. Totally
Yeah.
different children, but he stole our heart.
It is a very difficult lesson to learn that really God
It
has
is.
a better plan for us. You know, and God's plan is going to turn out a lot better than anything that we could concoct ourselves. And even though sometimes we're horrified, we don't like what God gives us, we want to reject it, we need to learn to adjust our minds, adjust our lives, and adjust our thinking and say to God, whatever you send down the way, that's really what I want. And I'm going to accept it, I'm going to live with it, I'm going to make the most of it, and I'm going to give thanks for it, I'm going to praise you for it. Lindsay, you came in as if you had something to say.
Oh, no.
He's the cameraman.
No. Okay.
I'm more in disguise.
Oh, okay.
You said, how do we have, you go back and think about what we just studied. If we can answer to God the way Abraham did at the end, here I am.
Yeah.
If we can answer that in the true sense of how Abraham, that means our heart is,
That's right.
we're now ready.
That's right. Or like Paul said, what would you have me do, Lord?
Yeah.
You know, it's not what would you have me do,
The
Lord?
prophet who said, here I am, Lord, send me.
That's right. That's right. Isaiah. That's right. Hear mine.